Okay, great. So you talked a little while ago about evidence of non-physical causality. Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I asked for somebody to produce some and they couldn't think of a single thing.
Okay. I was hoping to get into that a little bit. It's just some half-baked ideas I had that I'm hoping you can straighten out a little bit. But you mentioned something, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it. You said that there's a difference between, like, you'd accept evidence, but you wouldn't accept an argument. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Oh, I said an argument isn't evidence. That's what I said.
Can you explain what that means? I'm not sure I'm familiar with that.
I mean, if you want, so like, say we were in the court of law and one person produces just simply arguments like I don't know, they're trying to accuse somebody of something, and one team just simply says nothing other than, well, he's the kind of person that would do blank or whatever. Rumors would technically be evidence, I guess. So that's kind of that's an argument that kind of is evidence in a sense. But like, I don't think anybody really accepts the idea that a logical argument actually proves something, because you can have an argument that is fleshed out and valid, like a deductive argument or whatever, but that doesn't prove that your argument is true, because we don't know if it's sound, because what if the premises are false? And I've never met anybody that's ever successfully explained to me that you can prove that premises are valid just with arguments. The only exception in tacos, and I kind of talked about this a little bit, would be like arguments about things like if something is true by definition. But those are just concepts that exist in our brains. Nobody would call those like real things in the sense that protons really exist.
Sure, sure. Okay, so you're saying that an argument wouldn't be acceptable to prove the, existence or the reality or non-reality or whatever of something because it's just, I guess, just making suppositions and then basing from those suppositions, coming to the conclusion that it exists or does not exist.
No, it's just a claim. The only thing you can do is like claim like by definition that's like what it is or whatever. To me, that's like what things like the transcendental or whatever argument for God are. Like, well, God is defined as the maximally greatest possible thing. The maximally greatest possible thing would have to exist because that's better than not existing. Therefore, it exists. I mean, you've just defined something into existence, and nobody accepts that for literally anything else. So I just find it weird when people do that. So sometimes I front load an argument doesn't prove anything when I think that that's the direction somebody is going to go in.
Sure. Okay. Well, I appreciate us getting that out of the way right away because if this gets into argument territory, maybe we can hash that out a little bit more. But I'm hoping to
Sure.
provide you evidence, I guess you could say, of non-physical causality. So I guess I would start with like, would you agree that things in the world actually change?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Unless,
Sorry,
unless,
some of these are going to be super dumb,
sorry.
but no, no, no. Please go. I just want to say that some of these are going to be super dumb, but I just want to make sure like we're in clear agreement on some of them.
Yeah, I mean, the
Um,
universe changes. I don't have, unless the block universe is true, and then all states already pre-exist, and so then maybe that means that the current state isn't responsible for the conditions of any other state. And what the fuck does that mean? I don't know. They don't pay me. They don't pay me enough, and I don't have that kind of degree to figure that out.
um, and would you agree that like for something to change, all it is like a potential being actualized? Like in order for something to change, it has to be actualized from potency.
Um, I don't really exactly know what that means. Like
Okay, sure.
something
So
has a like I've heard this argument from God too. There's that really really popular. Well, I don't. It's kind of popular. Several 100,000 view video of the guy on YouTube going over all the arguments for God's existence, and he said, "Well, God is the the one thing that is not actualized. And I was like, okay, well now we're just doing special pleading, but I guess I don't. Potency and actualization. Go ahead, and if you can flesh out what those mean so we have a little bit better idea, that would be great.
Sure. So also just to let you know, I'm hoping to get to the point where we're at that purely actualizer that we were talking about before, but we can take steps there and hopefully like the special pleading fallacy we can get out of the way. But the idea of actualization, so let's start with potency. You have the potency to move, 1 inch to the right or to the left in your chair. Like that's a potential that you have. In order to actualize that potential, you actually have to, lift yourself up and move yourself. So potency is the potential to do something, whereas actualization is the actual, I guess you could say, impact of the potential. You actually doing the potential, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we can agree that in order for something to change, in other words, like your position in the chair to change, you have to have the potential to do it, as well as it actually has to happen.
Sure.
And so that means that this actualization of potential is actually real in the world. That should be without explanation, but would you agree with that?
Say that very last part again, sorry.
It's just a combination of like the first part and then the last half we were talking about, that the actualization of potential is a real feature of the world. Would you agree with that?
The actualization feature is a real feature of the world. I mean, it's something that happens, I guess. I wouldn't call it a property of matter necessarily, but
yeah. So this will get into like the principle of causality. Are you familiar with that?
Cause and effect.
Yeah, like something can't be like in the language I was just using. Like a potential can't be actualized unless it's something already actual has actualized it. Like something that's not real cannot change something that is real, in other words.
That makes sense. Something that's like saying something that doesn't exist can't interact with things that do exist.
Yes, exactly. Again, sorry, some of these are going to be super dumb, but like when you discuss big questions like this, I think it's important to go step by step. So this anything that we change in the world, you'd agree, is thus happens from something that is already real. And this would mean that any occurrence, any time that, say, object X changes or whatever, that means that there's a substance Y or another object Y or whatever, which does the changing. Would you agree with that?
Seems to be the way things work.
Okay, great. Where do we want to go from this? So if you then take the existence of that Y, which does the changing of the object X,
yep,
that means that there has to be something that supports Y's existence. In other words, like, so for your chair to exist, for example, in the position that it's in, there has to be a floor. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I feel like we're just getting to the first mover eventually.
Yeah, that is where we're getting. Do you just want to skip to there?
Kind of. So yeah, I went over this I made a response video to that top 10 arguments for God or whatever, because I feel like this is special pleading because the argument goes like God is pure act. And so when anything acts, it actualizes its potential. Is that accurate?
Of course.
But when God acts, which we know God acts, no potential is realized?
No, well, okay, so let me clarify. So you are referring to, I believe we'd call horizontal actualization, whereas I'm referring to vertical actualization. That's just a jargon we can just disregard. But basically, it's not the argument that God creates this, which then creates this, which then creates this, but it's rather that God is the concurrent supporter of all things in the universe. So your chair can be where it is right now because of the floor, and the floor can be where it is right now because of, the earth or because of your house or whatever. But what supports the earth? Well, eventually you get to a point where you're at God. So it's concurrent actualization and not this horizontal or vertical actualization, I should say. And that gets rid of the special pleading fallacy.
Why would that get rid of the special pleading fallacy?
Because so especially the special pleading fallacy, if I'm understanding the way you're using it, because there's a couple different ways you can use it when it comes to God. When you're referring to the special pleading fallacy, are you referring to God being able to actualize without God itself or himself or herself or whatever being actualized?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so then maybe we need to take a few extra logical steps to see. Maybe I'm skipping just way too far ahead here. Because in order for anything to be actual in the universe, which we've agreed that there are, actual things in the universe, I'm sure. In order for anything to be actual in the universe, there has to be something that is supporting its potential.
Sure.
It
So
has to be
I wanted to ask this earlier, and I think this is probably
okay.
a better direction to go.
Okay.
Why can't I just say that that the universe is that thing, which grounds? Because we would just define the universe as everything that exists.
Sure, that's just applying a different name to something, though. I'm okay if we want to rechange God to universe, like with a capital U or whatever.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say. Well, I'm not making like a argument for like Spinoza's God or anything like that. I mean, I'm rejecting any God concept. It's just
Okay.
why do I need to assume that a supernatural, non-physical causation is even required? Why can't we just say the universe is all that exists? And
Because then you're saying, sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
the only other thing I was going to add is we also don't have access to any information about cause and effect in the first like few Planck seconds of our universe. And I don't see why it would be the case that some as of yet undiscovered quirk of physics or grand unifying theory or whatever, or just simply the concept of time, which would play into our concept of cause and effect, is very, very different in those instances. So, like, we're demanding that it make good intuitive sense to us, and we exist in a very mundane sort of existence, considering what kinds of things do happen in the universe or have happened in the universe. And like the demand that all of this conform to that, I think is just a little too you're trying to put it in a like you're demanding that it makes sense. And I get the urge for that, but I don't think that skews it, just because we can imagine something that is fairly simple to explain and does well to satisfy the sort of the itch we have, or the God-shaped hole in our like whatever existence universe or whatever. Just because we have something that's nice and digestible that fits there, I don't think that actually gives credence to the idea being true in any way.
Oh, no, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Just because, an idea is simple to explain doesn't mean it's true. And I actually don't think that this whole, what we're referring to, non-physical causality, or what I refer to as God, I don't think that's a simple question to explain either. So you're using science term. I think you use like the plankton. I can't say that I'm familiar with that stuff. I know you're a scientist. I can't say I'm familiar with that stuff. So some of that stuff you might need to explain to me.
Well, like, do you agree that the Big Bang happened?
I'll agree with the general scientific consensus. Sure, I can't honestly say I have an opinion on it because I couldn't even tell you what the Big Bang is in all reality.
That's fine, but so the problem is, much like inside of the event horizon of a black hole, in the first like Planck second of the universe, our laws of physics break down and can't explain what's going on. So like if somebody told you that heaven is inside of black holes because science can't explain what's going on within them, I think we would be like, that's not a good argument that therefore heaven exists inside of black holes. It's absolutely possible.
Yeah.
And we have something that explains a very deep mystery in our universe, but I don't think it's a good explanation. And so I think that the frontier of like what we don't know in science is a God-shaped hole, I think. And so this is just an example of people putting that peg there, but I don't think for the same reason, I don't think that that's a reasonable like justification is pretty much what I'm saying.
Okay, so I guess I really don't, not that it's something that should be disregarded, but I guess I don't really totally need to understand the whole plankton theory, whatever, how that all works. But basically, you're saying we don't understand what happened, like in the smallest unit of time conceivable when the universe was created.
Yeah, and I think that this whole what we're talking about here basically is a God of the gaps argument, and I think that's sort of like a case you can make for why we can put God in this instance, why God fits there, because we can't explain that, causality and whatever, it breaks down, and where the hell did the universe come from and all that other stuff in the first place. And my general response to these things is like, we don't know if the universe came from anywhere. It might be completely uncaused, uncreated, or whatever. We don't know, and so we don't need an unactualized actualizer or a something with no potential or anything like that.
So let's say we have like the concept of a plankton. Like obviously a plankton isn't something that I can like grab and throw like a football or whatever. But in order for a plankton unit of time, if I'm understanding what it is correctly, in order for that to exist, there has to be something that actualizes its existence.
Yeah, and it may just be the universe.
But that gets us back to the God question. Because then we can just substitute the universe for God. I'm okay with doing that.
When you're adding, you're adding a layer of, you're adding something else to it. You're saying that there was a point where there was not a universe and a God that I don't know on what grounds we're even claiming that this God can exist. We just have to admit by stupefaction that there must be something, and it has no discernible properties or anything, but it then made a universe begin to exist. And I'm saying, why not just think that a universe existed and through virtual particles interacting initiated a Big Bang state within itself or whatever. So I just don't get why we need to add another thing to this.
So I would disagree that we can't ascribe particular attributes, as you were saying, to this universe or God, and I'd be happy to do that. Maybe that's the more effective way for me to present my argument here, to rather, instead of arguing that we have a purely actual actualizer, just to go down the route of like a immaterial, immutable, eternal, like incorporeal type being, and then from those maybe go into an actualizer, if that would be more useful. And again, if you have to kick me out because this is taking too long, just
it probably wouldn't be useful, because I'm just going to tell you that that is the very definition of something that does not exist. Something that does not exist exists nowhere, is made of nothing, and never has existed, so exists no when. A spaceless, timeless, immaterial God is the exact same thing as something that does not exist. But we're just claiming that this God exists, and we use like qualitative descriptors for it. It's eternal, and it's has all these omni characters, and it's God is love, and whatever else. And it's like, okay, well, now we're talking about like it's almost like we're having a Platonic discussion of, does roundness exist? And that's just you're speaking a different language than me at that point, and we're not gonna be able to agree on something like that. So I think that it kind of renders the argument to be incoherent, because you're trying to describe to me something that has no discernible characteristics exists. It has the exact same properties as something that does not exist. And I don't think you'll have any luck with that.
Okay,
but like you can go ahead and do this for a couple minutes. But there are 6 other people with their hands up, so it would be nice to talk to a few other people.
Yeah, whenever you want to kick me out, just like or if you want me to leave right now, I totally understand that. But this has been a very helpful conversation.
No, yeah, go ahead and try to make your case.
Okay, so okay, how do I want to do this? Okay, so I'm gonna try to go through this not the vertical way, but a horizontal way rather. So, in order for something to exist, we've agreed that something else has to actually turn it from potency to actualization. We know that that's a real thing in the world. So, thus, in order for that thing which actualizes the other thing to exist, it requires something else that actualizes that thing's existence. Would you agree with that?
In order for something to exist, it requires something else that actualizes its existence?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's completely different than cause and effect. So, like, for example, I would probably just argue that science tells us that matter and energy aren't created or destroyed, and we have no evidence of anything ever being created, certainly no creation ex nihilo. So I actually kind of reject the argument that in order for something to exist, it's predicated on something else causing it to come into existence. We've never seen anything come into existence.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because I shouldn't say come into existence, but rather support its existence concurrently. It's like the chair example I gave before. For the chair to be where it is right now, it has to be supported by the floor. For the floor to be where it is, it has to be supported by the house, and the house supported by the earth, and so on and so forth. It's concurrent and not like one after the other. Is that more understandable, I guess?
Yeah, that's fine, but this isn't an argument for why is there something rather than nothing, which I feel like is kind of the ultimately the direction you want to go with this argument, but that's not. I don't think that that's that we are supporting that yet.
No, I agree with you. I actually don't think that's a direction that I want to go right now. I don't think I've presented enough evidence for that yet, enough argument for that yet. But would you agree that in order for something to exist, or not to come into existence, but for it to exist simultaneously, it requires something else that actualizes its continuous existence, like the chair, or something, and of course you can create that other thing, which is just an infinite regress, or it has to be something that is just purely actual. That's what we're going to ultimately come down to.
I would just say I see no problem with the claim that the universe just exists.
I mean, respectfully, that's a non-answer. Like that you're just saying it exists because it exists. Respectfully.
Well, I'm not saying that's why it exists. I'm just telling you that it matter-of-factly does exist, and I don't see any problem with saying that there is not a source or anything that caused its existence to be there, because the only solution to that is to say that something that you said it's absurd for me to say about the universe is the thing that is the reason the universe exists. And now here's the special pleading that we brought up 20 minutes ago.
This seems to be almost like I don't want to accuse you of intellectual laziness, but I feel like that response is because I could say, for example, right now I have a sore throat, right? I have a sore throat because I have a sore throat. Doesn't matter why, doesn't matter how it came into being. We don't even know if it came into being. I just have it, right? But it's important to actually know, like what you as a scientist would do or as a science teacher would do. We investigate why those things are there. Now, it's possible that there is no why, but I would firmly disagree with that. So the question is important. And we can't just say it exists because it exists. Rather, we should investigate why it exists. Would you agree with that?
But we don't do this for God. And again, I think you could support the idea for the universe just existing because we've never seen anything in our universe begin to exist. So I mean, if it's intellectually lazy to say that about the universe, then why is it not intellectually lazy to say it about God? I guess here's what I'd like to do. I'd like you to just answer that question, and I'm going to try to resist trying to make a counter argument or whatever, because we've been going for a while and there are 7 people that also want to talk. But because it's been really fun, but you know.
No, I
We only
totally
have so much
understand.
time.
If no, and I understand that. If you don't want me to answer the question because you're not going to respond, I can totally respect that as well.
No,
But
give your response, and then we'll try to just kind of leave it at that, I guess.
okay. And what's the precise question you're asking, just to make sure I understand it?
It sounded like you were saying it's intellectually lazy to claim that the universe just exists because you're not addressing like the why it exists or anything like that. But why is it, if that's not appropriate, why is it appropriate to claim that God can just exist?
Sure. Okay. So briefly, it's appropriate to say that God just exists because he is, as we mentioned in the beginning, he is a purely actual actualizer, and that is philosophically necessary for anything else in the universe to exist. Something cannot create its own existence, neither simultaneously nor like one after the other in a series. Right? The chair has to be where it is because something is simultaneously supporting it. So it is very appropriate to assign it to God, but not to the universe. Those can be two very different things because they are of the simultaneity approach rather than the one after the another approach. Hopefully that answers a little more helpful, I guess.
I don't think so, because I would just say that the universe is not created. It just exists. And I could I could make a like a logical argument like do you believe in the law of non-contradiction or whatever?
Sure, of course.
So I've heard people say this before. So if the universe exists, it can't not exist, right?
Of course.
Yeah, so logically the universe can't not exist. So like we don't need to invoke a god or anything for its existence.
I mean, that just falls flat on its face because of the first supposition we've agreed to. Like, we didn't answer why. We just said the universe can't not exist.
Because it's necessary. You would just say that it's necessary.
Sure, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, I think claiming that the God exists because it's the explanation for the universe, I think that that's remedied by just simply saying that the universe is uncreated. But anyways, people will continue arguing about this until the end of time. But it was cool. Thank you.